I'm Erin Price-Wright. I'm a general partner at Andreessen Horowitz on the American Dynamism team. I was going to caveat my talk by saying that I don't know if I'm a VC because I'm an optimist or if I'm an optimist because I'm a VC, but I wanted to caveat that I have a very optimistic bias on the world. But then I realized that I'm probably in a room with a lot of other people who have an optimistic bias, so I maybe don't need to make that caveat after all. In 1941, the United States entered World War II as an underdog. By most accounts, we had a third-rate military. Our Army ranked 19th, approximately by size. Our Air Force was 6th, but our planes were outdated compared to Germany and Japan. And our Navy was 3rd, but far from ready for a global fight. And yet, by the end of the war, the US became the greatest military power in the world. And what made that possible wasn't just manpower or money, it was our commercial industry. Henry Ford and the American auto sector turned Detroit's factories into what FDR called the arsenal of democracy in less than a year. We retooled, reorganized, and we began producing planes, tanks, and ammunition at unprecedented speed. And that's the power of the American economy and American adaptation. We can move mountains when the stakes are clear. And today, in many respects, we are an underdog again. It feels like it happened slowly and then all at once, but we've all seen the charts. I don't have to go into details there. China outpaces the United States in energy production, in battery manufacturing, drones, robotics, electronics, auto manufacturing, mining, refining, and they're closing the gap quickly in AI. Some would argue they're neck and neck. And what began as a cost labor advantage about 4 decades ago has evolved under the top-down direction of the Chinese Communist Party into a full-scale national industrial project. And the result today is deep technical expertise, vast infrastructure, and the ability to build almost anything at staggering and unprecedented speed. The race for technological leadership in the 21st century will determine far more than GDP growth. It will define the balance of global power, the resilience of our economies, and the freedom of our societies. And we cannot take for granted that we will win that race. Now, the US military has long been a catalyst for technological progress. The Pentagon helped pioneer semiconductors, microprocessors, the internet, GPS, supercomputing. I could go on, which is a pretty incredible venture portfolio. And as a VC myself and also a Palantir alum, I say proudly that we invest in a lot of defense companies. But defense alone can't rebuild American industry. And why is that? Because the defense sector really lacks the type of competition that drives real innovation. So, we're in this regime of cost plus contracts, rigid procurement rules, and that means that the DOW, as I have to remind myself that it is now, is often literally disincentivized from adopting new technologies quickly. Instead, they buy exquisite systems that do very little to invigorate the modern industrial base, and I would argue in many cases actively hinder the modern industrial base. By contrast, consider Tesla and Starlink. Both were built as consumer-first businesses with relentless pricing and scaling pressure and an intense demand for features and performance. These companies and the talent ecosystems and supply chains stemming from them now play a central role in the U.S. defense base. Their success shows that the path forward isn't to wall off defense from commercial, it's to ensure that the two are truly mutually dependent. A defense-only ecosystem, as we've seen, leads to years and years and decades of stagnation. But a defense commercial hybrid, like we saw in World War II, thrives on urgency, scale, and iteration. Now, I know that a lot of people in the American Dynamism cinematic universe really turn up their noses at the concept of consumer tech, like it's somehow beneath us. After all, we wanted flying cars, and all we got was 180 characters. But actually, the American consumer is our great gift. We are the most demanding consumers on earth. We want to buy random stuff online, have it arrive in a day, and then we want to return 75% of it the next day instantly. We want to stream any movie ever made from our couch. Our thirst for content is insatiable, and it's completely absurd the amount of money we're willing to pay for this privilege. We want on-demand taxis, and if that was not enough, we want our taxis to drive themselves. We want to work remotely. We want to work from a van in Joshua Tree, and we want high-speed Wi-Fi the whole time. And we want AI and more AI and more AI. We want it at work. We want it at home. We want it as an entertainment. We want it everywhere. And this has produced trillions of dollars in economic value in the form of companies like PayPal, Nvidia, Stripe, Google, Apple, Facebook, DoorDash, Tesla, Netflix, Amazon, Uber, Waymo, and OpenAI to serve us, the richest and most wildly entitled consumer group that has ever lived. But importantly, the technology developed at these companies then has gone on to underpin companies like Palantir and SpaceX, Anduril, Saronic, who are remaking the way the government prepares for war. This is not an accident, and this is the American formula. Commercial innovation is the foundation of our national strength. This is American dynamism. It wasn't a government plan that built Silicon Valley. It was a system of incentives that rewarded speed, trust, and iteration. It wasn't a bureaucratic directive that gave us cloud computing and smartphones. It was thousands or maybe millions of engineers competing and scaling in the private sector. And now we stand at the edge of a new revolution, which is software-defined everything. So cars, factories, homes, your electric grid, weapons, all increasingly governed by code. And guess what? America is really, really, really good at software. But software alone is not enough anymore. The next generation of breakthroughs, whether it's in AI, robotics, energy, defense, they depend on hardware just as much as code. The chips that run the models, the batteries that power our systems, the motors that move machines, these are foundations of the new economy. We can't lead in AI if we don't lead in compute and fabrication. We can't dominate in autonomy if we don't also control the motors, sensors, and power electronics. We can't defend ourselves if critical components are made by our adversaries. To win the future, we need to reproduce the success that we've had in software and hardware. And that means building a new kind of ecosystem, not by central planning, because we are really bad at central planning, but by scaling what has worked for us. So Silicon Valley isn't a place. It's a network built on trust, meritocracy, and this pay it forward culture. The ecosystem has allowed startups to share customers, talent, and infrastructure to learn faster and survive longer. Everybody makes fun of YC companies for just basically only selling to each other. But actually, that's the beauty of a startup ecosystem. It allows new startups to get signal faster and find people who are existentially dependent on them. It allows us to deconstruct what it means to build a company into its component parts so that your company can focus on building the thing that matters critically to you. Vertically integrate where your life depends on it, but don't write a new database if you don't have to. Don't rebuild your HR system just for fun. That's the mindset that we now need to bring to hardware. Whether it's grid infrastructure, drones, electric vehicles, robots, the core components are the same. You have the raw materials, you have metals and minerals, you have the power systems, you have batteries, electricity, you have power electronics, which convert that into instructions, you have the motors, which actually move the thing, actuators, and you have compute, which is the brains. These are the building blocks of a new industrial era, and the companies that master them will power everything we build. It's really exciting, and I have a lot of hope standing here because I see it happening already in our portfolio. Startups organically working together, sharing parts, know-how, and customers. We have late-stage defense companies who historically maybe had to bring all of their electrical engineering in-house, now being able to outsource that and board manufacturing. You know, we see roboticists who grew up learning how to make actuators, really realizing that these are the same components that go into drones that the military needs. Our startups are starting to sell to each other and build out that ecosystem. I tell early stage founders all the time to stop waiting for the Boeings of the world to buy from you. Build for new customers. Be the difference between their success and failure. Make your customers existentially dependent on you and find the customers that are. Align your incentives and take control of your destiny. The timing couldn't be more important. We're at the beginning of the largest industrial buildout in America in generations. Billions are flowing into data centers and AI. New factories are going up. Like every week, I read about a new one: Arizona, Ohio, Utah, New Mexico, Louisiana. Battery plants are getting built in Georgia, Nevada, Michigan. New nuclear projects are breaking ground across the country. Supply chains that left decades ago are starting to come home, and not because of some great government plan, albeit tariffs aside, but out of sheer capitalistic necessity. It matters to be close to your customers. Private capital is flowing into manufacturing, robotics, energy, AI, defense. I can attest to that. I am part of that private capital, not because of government mandates, but because the economics are actually starting to make sense again, thanks to software broadly and AI more specifically. This is our moment to rebuild American industrial strength, but we cannot do it in silos. We need to work together across hardware and software, consumer tech and defense tech, startups and primes, investors and policymakers. We need to all be building this together. And government should not control the ecosystem as it does today. It should amplify it. The state's role is not to design every system, set out every single tiny requirement, but to set direction, remove friction, and provide leverage. That means creating open standards and test beds that speed up R&D as it relates to defense, buying what the commercial sector already builds very well. That means investing early in what's too risky for private capital and making sure incentives are in place for American innovators to scale fast. When the Pentagon works with the commercial sector, as we've seen, and not apart from it, we unleash the full power of the American innovation engine. In 1940, Roosevelt called America the arsenal of democracy, and today we must become the arsenal of technology, the nation that builds, scales, and exports the systems that power a free and open world. That won't come from central planning. It won't come from government industry. It will come from government industry founders, investors, everybody working together, united by a shared capitalistic purpose, and it will be powered by our consumer engine. We've done it before. We built the airplane, the microchip, we built the internet, and now we can build the next generation of technologies, the machine systems and infrastructures that will define the next great American century. The race is on. So if you're a builder, buy into the ecosystem. As a consumer, embrace your inner Kim Kardashian and demand your next burrito be delivered by drone. If you're a policymaker, let's double down on the primacy of our commercial sector and just get out of the way. And let's upscale some American dynamism.